Kadosh, Boker Tov. There's Masechet Pesahim Daf Bet Amud Aleph 102a1. However, we're just going to start on the last line of Kuf Aleph Amud Bet, where it says Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, where we're answering up, right? We're basically says Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, and he says, who is the Tana that teaches Akirot? Who is the Tana that teaches that when you have Shinui Makom, then you would be obligated to make another bracha, even on something which already requires a bracha acharona in the original place? He says this shita is the shita of Rabbi Yehuda that argues on the Chachamim. Titanya, but we learned in a Braita, it says the Berata Chaverim Shayu Mesubin. You have Talmidei Chachamim, which they are Mesubim. They are sitting down and they are eating. Ve'akru reglehe lelech lebet hakneset or lebet midrash, and they went to go to the Bet HaKnesset or to the Bet HaMidrash. Keshehen yotzin en teunin beracha lemafreya. So when they go out of their houses, they are not required to do a beracha at the beginning, which means they do not have to do a beracha acharona before they leave the houses. Ukshen chozrin, and when they go back into the house, en teunin beracha lechatechila, they don't need a beracha rishona, which means the beginning beracha before. So Amar Rav Yehuda says, Rav Yehuda, one of these words, that's when they left some chaverim there, which means that they left people behind to be like what we explained yesterday, like a shomer. But if everybody left, so then so when they leave, they do need a bracha at the beginning. Bracha at the beginning means the kavanah right before they leave, they have to make a bracha, which is the after blessing. Okay? Bracha acharona. When they come back, they have to make a new bracha at the beginning, right? Because they actually left. So it comes out of this braita, which was brought above, was a shita of Rabbi Yehuda. But the Chachamim argue and they say that you do not need to make another bracha acharona, right? You do not make when you have to come and make the bracha acharona in the same place, right? You do not have to come and make the bracha rishona again, even if you did not leave over, right? Any people that are shomerim. Okay, any people that are going to be left behind. So now says the Gemara, Ela ta'ama, but rather the reasoning that we just mentioned now is because of the varima teunim bracha lachorem bimkoman, because the items which require a bracha, right, in their certain place, in their place where you ate it, tekshehen yotziin en teunim bracha lemafreya. So according to Shitat Chachamim, which is the Tanakama, when you go out, you do not need a bracha lemafreya at the beginning. You also don't need a bracha. But if you don't need a bracha in their place, even according to the rabbis, then you do need a bracha, whether it is when you're going out or when you're coming back. Why? Because of Shinui Makom. The second that you did Shinui Makom, you're obligated. Remember, the difference that we mentioned already was, and remember this a lot, that we said that bracha acharona is only required to go back and Birkat Hamazon. Okay, and to do with beracha of borei nefashot, you do not have to go back. There is going to be a machloket to do with beracha of al michya, whether it's going to be, that's the famous machloket, is it doraita, not doraita, if you have to sit down, not sit down, right? And all these halachot, it all depends on this. Okay, but for sure, the two categories which are for sure is birkat hamazon, which for sure you have to come back and say it in its proper place, and beracha acharona, which is borei nefashot, that you do for sure do not need to do that. Okay? Unless you continue the even if you continue the Seudah somewhere else, it's not lechatechila. You would still have to do Birkat Hamazon in the first place. Okay? So says the Gemara, so Limati Yavatiyuv did the Rabbi Yochanan. So why don't we just say that this is a question against Rabbi Yochanan? Because Rabbi Yochanan wanted to say that Shinui Makom does not need an extra beracha, even if something which does not need a beracha acharona in their certain place. Okay? So says the Gemara, Velamo Tfine Echad Azimna. He says what? Didn't we already say this already once? Right? Didn't we already ask this once on Rabbi Yochanan? So why do we have to ask it again? Meaning that some people, they like to harp on things. Right? So they ask you once and they're going to ask you again. You asked once, barakah, that's it. You asked once, that's it. You understand? So what are you going to ask again? So it says the Gemara, he says, are we also going to say that this is going to become a tiyuvta, which means even though we pushed off the words of Rabbi Yochanan because of the braita which was brought above, nevertheless we should ask, does it become a tiyuvta against him? Right? Do we say that this is also a question against him? So he says over here, because if a person is going to come and answer the first braita, right, or he's going to say that he was being somech on other braitot, right, maybe that braita was not correct. So then we could still ask from Rabbi Yochanan from this braita, which means you're right. We already asked against Rabbi Yochanan from one braita. But now, let's say I answer up that Braita, or I'm going to say that Braita is not a good Braita. So now I could actually, and I could ask him from another Braita. So it's not just stam that I'm coming and I'm piling on. I'm piling on for a purpose, which means even if you're going to answer me this way, I could answer you now. I could ask you again from another Braita. Okay? You understood or not? One more time. Yeah? Comes Rabbi Yochanan, right? And they ask a question against Rabbi Yochanan. Yeah? So when they come and they ask a question against Rabbi Yochanan, they already pushed off Rabbi Yochanan because of a Braita. Now comes the Gemara and asks from another Braita on Rabbi Yochanan. So the Gemara says, right, in the very nice words, why are you kicking a dead horse? You already pushed off his word. You pushed off his words. Come on, chalas. So the Gemara answers, no, very simple. What happens if the Braita that we asked upon him, we answer it up? Either by saying that he was relying upon another Braita, or we're going to answer it up by saying that that Braita that you're bringing against him was Meshubeshet. Meshubeshet means that it wasn't a good Braita, meaning that there was mistakes involved, right? Sometimes people, instead of paying attention to the rabbis, right, they're on the phones. So they're not paying attention. So they could say certain things afterwards. It could be polet varim that are meshubeshet, you understand? Which are not 100% accurate. You understand? So braita, which is meshubeshet, something like that, could be a problem. So what do? So he says, we're going to ask from another braita. Why do we ask another braita? Not to stam, to pile on. It's just in case that we were going to answer, and now you got another braita also against him. So now try to answer up this one as well. I didn't say he didn't read.
No, like yesterday's daf, we said something.
No, yesterday's daf we brought down that there was one person that he said something, and we asked. It was Rav Huna. We said, 1 second, Rav Huna's coming and trying to teach us something which brought down a Braita. Right. So we answered, he didn't hear of the Braita. That's why he taught it. Yeah, that's why he taught it. Yeah? Yeah, 100%. That's okay.
Okay. Is this still questioning the same Braita on Rabbi Yehuda?
So the Gemara answers, Amar lecha Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan is going to answer you, and he's going to tell you that there's no stira to his words from the Braita. Why? Even if it's going to be things, right, or different types of items which do not require a bracha afterwards in their place, which is like a borei nefashot, for example, he says, you also don't need to make a bracha acharona. Right, and that, or bracha rishona, right, he says, why is it written the words akru raglehen, that they got up? To teach you the chidush of Rabbi Yehuda, תאפילו בדברים שטעונים ברכה לאחרי ממקומם, תעמד הניחו מצד חברים, אבל לא הניחו מצד חברים, כשאין יוצאים טעונים ברכה למפרע, או כשאין חוזרים טעונים ברכה לכתחילה, which means it's coming to teach you a chidush, the strength of kocho of Rabbi Yehuda, which means until where does Rabbi Yehuda hold of such halacha that according to him, right, he says, even on something which you would need a bracha acharona in their place, for example, birkat hamazon, it's only because you left people behind, and that's why you don't need to make a new bracha. But if you didn't leave people behind, right, you would need a bracha acharona. So because of that, that's why it's coming to teach you. It's not a proof against him. It's just showing you the shita of Rabbi Yehuda, right, and therefore it's not a question against him. So Tanya Kavatid Rav Chasta, we also learn in accordance to Rav Chasta, right, that he was the one that made the differentiation between Shinui Makom or not. So he says, Chaverim shayu mesubin lishtot yain. Imagine right now you have Chaverim. Yeah? Remember, whenever it says Chaverim, they are Talmidei Chachamim. Right? So they're Chaverim. So it says, Chaverim shayu mesubin lishtot yain. They were mesubin to drink wine. Ve'akru raglehen ve'chazru. And they uprooted their legs. That means they went and then they came back. You don't have to make a new bracha. Okay? So says the Gemara, right? Which means that this is actually a braita, which is in accordance to him, but it says, V'akru raglehen ve'chazru. They do not need to make another bracha, right? As we already mentioned, that he says over here that the din, right, of whether they're tunim bracha acharona b'mkomam is going to be the exact same thing. Okay? Fine. Next, Tanu Rabbanan. We learned in a Braita. Okay? Benei chabura shayu mesubim v'kadash shalein hayom. Imagine right now people are eating on Erev Shabbat, and all of a sudden it became Shabbat. Yeah? Which means, imagine, it could have happened this year in Purim. Right? They started their meal, and they were taking all the time in the world. And all of a sudden, yeah, it became Shabbat. Yeah? Yes, he says, right? So imagine they're now taking their meal. Why did I say Purim? Because it's not. Why is the person having a Seudah mamash right on the Shabbat? It doesn't make sense. So obviously it had to be Be'eter. Right? So it was Be'eter. They did it with Be'eter. They were doing obviously a mitzvah. Right? So what happens? they were eating on Erev Shabbat, and all of a sudden it becomes Shabbat. So mevi'in lo kos shel yain, they bring him a cup of wine, ve'omer alav kiddushat hayom, and he says kiddush, okay? And then they bring him a second cup, and he says birkat hamazon. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda, okay? Rabbi Yosef Omer, Rabbi Yosef says, you don't have to stop the Suda, but rather ochel ve'olech ad shetichshach. You continue eating until the night time. No problem. Yeah, continue eating.
But you have to stop the kiddush.
No, that's what he says here. You don't have to stop the Suda once it becomes nighttime, but rather you continue eating also during Ben Hashmashot until it becomes 100% nighttime. Once it becomes 100% nighttime, then you would have to stop.
The only problem with the first opinion is that he's not allowed to eat bread.
So Rabbi Yosef just said that you're allowed to continue going until it becomes nighttime. Okay, fine. Says on Kuf Bet Amud Bet, Gamru, if they finish the Suda, right, then they're going to bring another two kosot. Kos rishon mevarech ala birkat hamazon. Ve'asheni omer alav kiddushat hayom. The second one you do kiddush, which means like this. According to Shitat Rabbi Yosef, it's the exact opposite of Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you would first do the kiddush, and then you would do the birkat hamazon. According to Rabbi Yosef, since you don't have to stop your meal and you're allowed the entire Ben Hashmashot, you're allowed to continue until nighttime. So therefore, you would be able to actually continue. You would do the birkat hamazon, and then you would do the kiddush, right, which is going to be afterwards. So remember, this is actually gaining a long time because remember that, for example, nowadays Ben Hashmashot is around here in Miami, it's around 35 minutes. So if it's around 35 minutes, you got obviously a lot of time, right, in order to do so. Now the Gemara is going to ask, Amai, why do we have to do two different cups? Why don't you say both of them on the same cup? Meaning on the same cup, do the kos of birkat hamazon plus the kos of kiddush. So Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav Sheshat, says Rav Huna name Rav Sheshat, en omrim shte kedushot al kos echad. We do not do two kiddushot on one cup. My tama, what's reasoning? Amar Rav Nachman Yitzchak, says Rav Nachman Yitzchak, lefi shenosim mitzvot chavilot chavilot. We do not do mitzvot chavilot chavilot. We do not do mitzvot like as a package. Some people like package deals. Yeah, 2 for 1, 3 for 1, 4 for 1. No. Mitzvot, each one separately. Each one is a mitzvah. You're not going to start bundling up, right, and doing all these things. You understand?
Twins.
Exactly, twins. You have to do 2 different ones. What?
How does it explain doing kiddush and birkat hamazon like one after another?
This is machloket between Maran and the Ramah to do with Sheva Berachot. Sheva Berachot, use 1 cup or 2 cups?
During Erev Shabbat?
2 cups. So the Ashkenazim use 2 cups. Moroccans use 1 cup. Shitat Maran is 1 cup. The Kaf HaChaim, the Dota Mizrach, nowadays they also use 2 cups. That's because they're Ashkenazim. It's not Fochel. They think that we're the Ashkenazim. They're the Ashkenazim. Right, we go like Shitat Maran. Shitat Maran is 1 cup. Shitat Morocco was always 1 cup. 1 cup. You don't have to mix. No, that mix is a whole. No, it doesn't. There's no problem whatsoever. The reason why is because Shitat Maran is Shitat Ashkenazim comes from this Gemara. Enos mitzvot chavilot chavilot. Why? One is the kos of birkat hamazon and one is the kos of Sheva Berachot. Shitat Maran is one causes the other, which means you cannot say Sheva Berachot if there's no birkat hamazon, right? Which means you cannot say it. You need minimum if you have 3 people and you're only going to do the first and last beracha, which is a gefen and asher bara. So then that's going to you, but you need birkat hamazon. If it's going to be for the 10 people and you're going to do the full Sheva Berachot, but you need minimum 7 that ate bread, right? And then 3 that ate mizonot in order to do zimun, and because you need birkat hamazon. Birkat hamazon is the gorem of the Sheva Berachot. So since one is causing the other, it's not considered doing mitzvot chavilot, and according to Shitat Maran, you do 1 cup. 1 cup, the chatan drinks from the cup, and after the chatan drinks from the cup, he puts it down, and then the kala drinks from the cup. And there's no problem, and she's allowed to drink from his cup. You don't need to pour from one to another or get the tablecloth dirty. You don't need to do all those things. Okay, fine. Yeah, so he says, velo, he says, what? You don't say 2 kiddushot on 1 cup? But we learned in the Braita, nichnas levetov motzei Shabbat. What about motzei Shabbat? You're going to make havdalah on the wine, on the candle, and on the besamim. And afterwards, you're going to say havdalah lakos. Now, if you only have 1 cup, which means that if you're going to do havdalah, so then you're not going to be able to do the birkat hamazon. then you do Birkat Hamazon, right? And you do everything in one shot. So you see from here that you do it. You do Birkat Hamazon and Havdalah on one cup. So how are you telling me that you don't do it? Here you do it. And so the Gemara, En lo shan, it's different if you don't have the cups. Meaning if you don't have enough wine, so then okay, fine. So we're going to allow you to do, right, 2 berachot on 1 cup. But if you have it, we're not going to tell you lechatchila start doing 2 on 1. 2 for 1, we don't allow you. If you don't have, so then we okay, fine. We allow you. You understand? So says the Gemara, what about Yom Tov? The Yom Tov shechal yot achar Shabbat. What about Yom Tov that falls on Motzei Shabbat? Yeah? When does that happen? Pesach this year. This Pesach, it's coming up. Passover. Yeah, Passover. So Pesach says, he says by Pesach, Yom Tov shechal yot achar Shabbat. The Itle, he says also it's going to be the same thing. Why? So he says, Ve'amar Rav says, Yaknehaz. Or here it says Yakneha. We learn, we know that the halacha is Yaknehaz. Because Zman, Shechianu at the end. Of course you do. You do Yain, Kiddush, Ner, Havdalah, Zeman. Right? Yain, right? That's what a geffen. Kiddush,
Would you just
right?
transfer the candle from the...
No. Why do you have to transfer the candle? Right? It's Yom Tov. It's not Shabbat. Right? You already have a candle lit. Correct? Right? You have the Ner Neshama lit, or you actually lit the Yom Tov candles. And you could use that candle as the Ner of Havdalah. We're not talking about that you're going to light one of those torches, because you have a big problem. If you light those big Havdalah candles, you can't turn it off. So that's going to be a little bit problematic. You understand? But you use it. Whether it's an Ner Neshama, you use the candles of Yom Tov for the what's it called? For the Havdalah. There's no problem. For the Ner. So you have Yain Kiddush, Ner Havdalah, and Zeman. And that's all going to be on 1 cup, even though you have 2 cups. And so the Gemara, Amri, Midelo Amar Zeman, from the fact that we didn't mention Zman, because if you realize, that's what I told you, it only says Yakneha. It doesn't say Yaknehaz. It doesn't say the Zayin at the end, which was Zeman. Zman is Shechianu. They usually say it. Miklal de Vishvi shel Pesach Haskina. We're not talking about a regular Yom Tov. We're talking about Shvi shel Pesach that falls on Motzei Shabbat. Techol mai dehavile achile veletle. Because whatever you already ate, you ate during the thing, and you only have 1 cup of wine. That's why. No, it's not this year.
It finishes on Sunday.
It finishes on. You already drank everything, and therefore you don't have any more wine. So ask the Gemara, Yom Tov Rishon de Itle. Says 1 second. But what about Yom Tov Rishon, which is Chalam and Shabbat? And there you do have 2 cups of wine. Ve'amar Abaye says Yakzenaha, right? Ve'Rava Amar Yaknehaz. That means we pass in Yaknehaz like Rava. But the first shita was Yakzenaha, which means you first do Yain Kiddush Zman, and then you do Ner Havdalah. Which means that according to the first shita, the Zman is right after the Yain Kiddush, because that's when the Zman is. Meaning you're not saying Shechianu and Havdalah. Havdalah you do every single Motzei Shabbat, right? Or every Motzei Chag. The Shechianu is on the Yain V'Kiddush. So because of that shita, they hold you do Yakzenaha, which means you first do Yain, Kiddush, then you do Shechianu, and then you do Ner V'Havdalah. But according to the second shita, that's how we pass, can you do Yaknehaz, which is basically Yain, Kiddush, Ner, Havdalah, and then Zman. Shechianu is the last thing, right, that you do. So he comes and he says, so you see from here, from the fact that it is mentioned Zman, so for sure we're talking about the first Yom Tov. And obviously you have more than 1 cup of wine, and still we said that you do everything in 1 cup. And so the Gemara, Ela Havdalah veKiddush Chada Mintahi. Havdalah and Kiddush is the same concept. Birkat Hamazon veKiddush, but Birkat Hamazon and Kiddush are 3 millennium, or 2 completely different things. Which means the entire concept of Havdalah and Kiddush, they were both to sanctify the day, whether you're coming in, when you come in and when you come out. So it's the same concept. It's not a different identity. Meaning, if somebody's going to ask you, what's Kiddush and what's Havdalah? It's the same thing. You have to sanctify. How do you sanctify? You sanctify the Kiddush when you come in, and you sanctify the Kiddush. You sanctify the Shabbat when you come in, you sanctify the Shabbat when you come out, right? Birkat Hamazon has nothing to do with that. Birkat Hamazon is you sanctified your stomach. You understand? And after sanctifying your stomach, now you're going to have to make a beracha, Birkat Hamazon with a cup. You understand? So therefore, it's a completely different thing. It's two million. Okay. So says the Gemara Gufa, right? Let's try to actually analyze this one more time. Yom Tov shechal yot achar Shabbat, when Yom Tov falls out on Motzei Shabbat, Rav says Yakneha. Shmuel says Yinhak, which means you're going to do Yain Ner Havdalah and Kiddush. So this is now like a completely different halacha now. This is talking about, right, what do you do, what is the order? Which means that, again, according to both of them, you're going to do 1 cup, and you're doing havdalah with the kiddush together, the only question is what is the order of the kiddush and the havdalah on that Motzei Shabbat. So it says which is Yom Tov. So he comes, Rav says you first do yakneha, yain kiddush, and then you do ner v'havdalah. Ner v'havdalah is always going to be together, correct? That makes sense. Ner and havdalah is always going to be together. But the question is, do you do first borei peri gefen and then the kiddush? Because that's what you have to first do. You sanctify first, and then you take out the Shabbat. Or do you do the opposite? Do you do yain, which is basically borei peri gefen, but borei peri gefen is always the first bracha in everything that you do, whether it's sheva brachot, whether it's going to be for the brit milah, whether it's going always you first do borei peri gefen, and all the brachot are ala yain. So you first do borei peri gefen, and then you do all the rest of the brachot. So first you do borei peri gefen, then you're going to do nen and avdalah, and then kiddush is the last. Was first you have to take out from the Shabbat, and then you go into the next holiness. But Rabba Amar and Rabba says on Kuf Gimel Amud Aleph on the top 103A1 on the top. But Rabba Amar and Rabba says yehanek. What does that mean yehanek? It says yain avdalah, ner, and then kiddush. So this shita is actually very interesting. That havdalah comes even before ner. Usually you first do borei minoresh, and then you do the havdalah, which is Amdi ben Kodesh Lechol, or he would be Amdi ben Kodesh Lekodesh at the end, the last blessing, right? Right. But here it's the opposite. Here you first do havdalah and then ner and then kiddush. The Levi Amar, Levi says, no, you do kiddush, ner, yain, and then havdalah. Okay, so you do kiddush, then you do ner, and then you do yain and havdalah. So obviously, again, each one of these things, right? You could go, to a very great lengths. Maybe Blina will try tomorrow. But Rabbanan says you do kiddush, yain, ner, havdalah. It's the same thing. No, sorry. The difference between them was yain and ner and yain. Meaning Levi said you do ner yain. Here is saying yain ner, right? Kiddush yain, then ner and havdalah. More better Davina says nikiya. That's you have to do ner, kiddush, yain, havdalah. This is even that means havdalah. You would do borei before even doing anything, and then you would do the kiddush and havdalah. The Marta Amar Mishmei Rabbi Yoshua nehik. What is nehik? Ner, havdalah, and then yain and kiddush. So bichlal, you're doing ner and havdalah first. So then you do hamavdi ben kodesh lekodesh. Then you would do borei peri gefen, and then you would do the kiddush. So every single one of these shitot, there's a lot of what to explain why each one is saying that which one should go first. Let's just very quickly, if you want the first one, right? He says over here, Rav, that he says you're first supposed to do yain kiddush ner avdalah. It says here, according to Rav, you for sure should do the kiddush before the set of the avdalah. Okay, and the reason why is because birkat kiddush is more chashuv than avdalah, right? Because kiddush you're going into the new day, and avdalah is on the old day, or because that if you do first the havdalah, so it looks like now that the Shabbat is like an old to you. It's like a yoke, so you want to get rid of it first. In a sense, so first you want to first go into the new one, and then you want to do avdalah last. That is the shita of Rav. Shemuel, right? He comes and he says you do yain ner havdalah and then kiddush. Kiddush is last, so you do avdalah first. He holds the opposite. You first have to do avdalah and then kiddush. The reason why is because the Gemara is going to explain, because the Shabbat is like a melech which is coming out of the city, and the Yom Tov is the kedusha is less than the Shabbat. So therefore, it's like a moshel nichnas. So first you have to be melaved melech, which that's the Shabbat through avdalah, and only afterwards do you do the Yom Tov, which is going to be the kiddush. Okay, that was the next shita. The next shita, which is basically going to be Rabbah. So he comes and he says, according to the shita of Rabbah, he comes and he says as follows. He says, yain avdalah ner kiddush, right? So he said over here, B'ikar adin savar Rabbah kedat Shemuel, that you have to do first avdalah to kiddush, but he's going to change the regular order of the avdalah, and he first does the avdalah before the ner. And the reason why is because according to him, you should separate the avdalah from the kiddush, right? Because that way because if not, there's like a stiran between both berachot. Because havdalah means is that, right, that we're saying the kiddush of Yom Tov is less than Shabbat, and birkat kiddush is saying that the Shabbat, that it's a shevach in kedushat Yom Tov. So because of that, we want to split it up. So according to him, that's why he says you do yain avdalah and then ner and then kiddush, which means that you're going to first do the avdalah and then you do the kiddush, but you want to have the ner as a hefsek in the middle, as a pasek. You heard Baba Chaki?
One cup only, right?
Yes, one cup. Okay. Then it says here, Levi was Kiddush ner yain avdala. He says he holds like Rav that you first have to do Kiddush and then you have to do avdala. But Birkat yain you say at the beginning just like you do normally. Okay? But he says what that's what you usually do. He says here now we're going to switch it. Okay? And the Machrim lifnei Birkat avdala. Okay, the reason why is to show the Birkat yain mitacheset to the Birkat avdala. Okay, fine. The next one, which is Chachamim, they also hold like Rav that you have to say Kiddush before Avdalah, but they hold like Levi that you have to suspect that maybe it looks like that the Birkat Yain is only on the Kiddush and not on the Avdalah. So because of that, you're going to switch it or order. Fine. Okay, and then Blina, we continue tomorrow then with all the different, we're going to continue with all this concept.